These poor weapons, man. Today on Weapon Select, we are going to be talking about the sad, sorry state of the Brella class. It's probably the single worst class in the game right now. I talked about blasters and how they're not seeing a lot of use, but oh my goodness, there is not a single Brella that anyone is saying is particularly good. There are only 3 of them too right now. Like, you've got all these other weapons that are getting updates in fresh season. Like, let's just look through here, okay? We've got multiple new shooter kits. We've got a new roller and another one that came out in the previous season. We've got a new charger that just came out. We had a new charger that came out last time. You know, new buckets. We had a new splatling in the last season. Dualies, okay, we had the dapples from the last season. Like, just about everything else has gotten a new variant. And yet, here we are with the Brellas that have had other variants before, even, and just haven't been touched. And the Brellas have also been just a major technical issue for Nintendo. Something about the netcode in this game is worse than it was before. There were, issues that it certainly had in Splatoon 2, but we just ran into way more. The game was a lot more broken, especially on launch. And there have just been some problems with the Brellas that nobody has had to deal with in previous games before that we're dealing with now, in terms of latency. So many situations that any Brella player can show you with a clip where they have the shield up on their screen, but the shots go through the shield anyway, and they just get hit and they go down. Happens to all of the different Brellas, but it's especially an important aspect of the Brella's kit to be able to do this. So let's talk about the mechanics of the Brella, and then talk about why this is such a problem for them, and what it leads to, the state of their game being. So, a Brella is, of course, an umbrella that has a shield that can open up in front of it, and that shield blocks shots. When you fire a shot, it does a certain amount of damage. It's a very slow fire rate weapon. I'm mashing the button a lot faster than it is actually coming out right here. It is capped at about this speed. So definitely not the fastest weapon at firing. And it's only going to do, at most, this 81 damage, so there's no one-shot or anything on this particular one. Different ones do different amounts of damage. But another aspect of this is that it's a shotgun-style spread. If you look very carefully at the shots that go out there, there are a bunch of them, and sometimes not all of them hit. So not only is it, sometimes mediocre damage, sometimes it's not going to 2-shot. That was a 5-shot. And so it really depends not just on your aim, but on kind of where that spread pattern ends up going. A lot of the time, you're much more likely to get max damage if you're a lot closer to them than you have as your max range. So the inconsistent damage is one thing, where it's kind of difficult to say exactly how much damage a shot is going to do. Sometimes you feel like you need 2, sometimes you feel like you need 3, and it's difficult to really say exactly how much damage you've done on any given one shot until the second one fires and you learn whether it splatted them or not. So the main weapon isn't anything special until you add in this mechanic. If you hold up the Brella shield, now you fire a shot, you block some shots, and then you fire another shot really quickly. So you're able to stay in the enemy player's line of fire while they're shooting at you without taking damage. And then when you find an opening and you think you've got your your opportunity lined up well, then you can fire the other shot. And that's actually pretty powerful. That is a mechanic that made this weapon really good at skirmishing in Splatoon 2. And because that mechanic is what makes it strong, the fact that that mechanic doesn't work on this game's netcode makes it so that this weapon really just doesn't have anything special to separate it. It does have Tri-Strike in this case, which is not bad, but it has a Sprinkler, So all it's really going to be doing with that is farming the Tri-Strikes. No real combat utility to that. That's not entirely true, but compared to anything else, it might as well be. And the other mechanic that you have is actually, if anything, a little bit of a nerf to the weapon for this particular weapon. Now we're getting into the weapon-specific stuff. This weapon and the Tenta Brella can launch their shields. If you just press and hold the ZR button long enough, this will detach and start moving forward. And that's typically not something that you want to happen. There are, use cases for it, but if we're talking about the fight that we were taking earlier, where we just hold the shield up and then take the shot when we can, well, if that opponent just keeps firing at our shield and doesn't let up, and doesn't, their aim doesn't move off, and they aren't running out of ink as fast as we are, and they're just gonna start hitting us as soon as the Brella falls down, and we just keep trying to hold this to protect ourselves, well, as soon as we launch that shield, now we've lost that, and now either we're being shot at directly right now and we have nothing to protect ourselves with, or we try and swim through that shield and use it like a kind of moving splash wall. A splash wall that's running away from us into enemy ink. And we try to keep it between us and find that last shot as we skitter away across the ground. So that's something that, there's utility to it if you want to, have this kind of advancing cover as you move forward. That's something that you can use it for, and it does do some damage. It paints. It's not a completely useless tactic. But the most common use case you're going to have for the Brella is getting into this kind of 1v1 engagement and wasting someone's time. And your goal is to, keep them in this fight by, getting them to shoot at the shield, getting them to try and pressure you down, while your teammates are rallying to you and helping take that player out, since you've been buying the time that you have by keeping the shield out. That's the most common way you're going to see this weapon used, and so for that playstyle, launching the shield is often not what you want to do with this weapon. So the fact that that happens, and the fact that you can't just keep the shield up indefinitely, I find that it makes it really difficult to use this weapon in that way. In the way that Splatoon 3 currently works. Another thing to consider about that is that while you've got the shield up, notice that you're painting your feet. And that is draining your ink tank. You can see the ink tank draining gradually, and once it gets to a certain point, that's when the shield's going to launch. So you only have about this much room to walk before that happens. It's nice, kind of, that it paints your feet in case you need to, swim away, but again, a lot of the time you spend on Brella is going to be spent running around. And so that's not necessarily the most important thing if you're just trying to take the fight like this. So, Brella, not in a phenomenal place at the moment. The damage is mediocre. The paint is definitely, not the best. It's not bad, but if you're trying to just paint for Tri-Strikes as fast as possible, this is probably not the weapon you're going for. And if that's the only thing you're doing, then you're missing out on the utility that you also get from something like a T-Tech with its Splat Bomb, from something like a Neo Splash with its fast move speed and its Splat Bomb. And what you're getting is something that's severely nerfed by the game's mechanical functionality. So, like I said, Brella's in an unfortunate place right now, and a lot of the same problems that plague the Splat Brella also plague the Tenta Brella. We'll talk about those a little bit more after the game is done, but right now, we'll go in and talk about what you want to be doing with the Brella. Like I said before, the Brella is a skirmisher, and so your goal isn't so much to win the fights yourself as it is to keep the fights going for as long as possible, to keep the opponent engaged, to be something that they have to deal with, to be up in their faces. And if you do that for long enough and you draw enough fire from them, oftentimes that gives your teammates the ability to follow up and help you out even if you couldn't hit the shots yourself. So the inconsistent damage isn't necessarily the worst thing if you are able to accomplish that goal of being a distraction. The Tri-Strike is obviously a really solid part of the kit, and it's something where if you don't want to be engaging right away, you can spend a good amount of your time during the match just painting for that special, and making sure you have that special at a moment when it's going to be helpful to pop it and get the rest of the team in. Now, another unfortunate comparison between it and something like the T-Tech is that you have the bomb with the T-Tech to set up combos where you throw the bomb, then you launch the special, then you throw another bomb. That makes that tri-strike a lot more powerful, because instead of having 3 lethal points of contact on the ground, you can have 4 or even 5 if you throw a second bomb after you're done throwing the special and you've refreshed your ink tank. And so this special is just straight up weaker on this weapon, because this weapon doesn't have that strong ranged zoning tool that the Tenta Splatter Shot does have. So really not a lot of great use cases for this in the competitive metagame right now, but we're going to go into open and see what we can do with it on splat zones. Got a good amount of paint, and if I get someone's attention, there's a roller who could potentially go after someone, so let's see if we can get in here and exert some control over this space. You'll notice how the players felt they had to back up because I was looking at them there, and that displaced them, and that allowed my teammates to go in afterwards and win a fight that got us control of their plat. So now we're just going to get up on their plat in the, obvious place to be. Unfortunately, they got an angle over me. Oh, was it Fizzy Bomb? I wonder where that hit me. The Brella is not, just an invincibility shield. There are, of course, ways to hit around it. It is definitely possible to do damage to someone even if they have the shield up, and not just because of latency, although that is also a reason that it happens. So you've got to be careful about weapons like sloshers, blasters, things that can hit up and around things instead of straight line of fire weapons. And even with straight line of fire weapons, you've got to make sure that they don't have an angle on your shield. Lastly, you don't want to just leave your canopy open against something that's going to shred it. You stand in front of a crab tank and you're going to realize that that shield is not strong enough to withstand what it is you're aiming it at. So you have to pick your engagements somewhat carefully still, because you have limited resources. You can see there my shield is broken and now I'm down. And if I don't get help in that time, if I don't manage to cause the fight to be won in some way, then I'm just stuck with a much inferior weapon to most of what's going to be trying to push me. So here I can contain this player, but you can see I don't really have a lot of resources to actually go and try and deal with them. I can't force that player too hard, because if I keep the shield up for too long, if I keep trying to rely on this weak kill time, I'm either going to get splatted before I splat them, or I'm going to run out of ink in my shield. And so there's a really delicate balance in how you decide to take a fight, in which fights you decide to take, and when it is you decide to back off. Because even backing off might be kind of difficult if you don't have the support around you. You're, going to be having to keep your shield up a lot of the time, which means that you're going to be walking slowly as you move up. Wow, that was a lot worse than I thought it was going to be. It was a little bit of a stomp, but I wasn't expecting 0-6, goodness. So, well, let's see if I can get better at the Brella class in time for the next one. The next one we're going to talk about is the Tenta Brella. The Tenta Brella actually has very similar mechanics to the Splat Brella. Way more similar than the Undercover Brella is, but it's just bigger. It's slower. It does a bit more damage. It can actually one-shot if it hits enough pellets. The max damage that it does is 119, but it will also one-shot one fewer pellet than that with a 102. Now, if you're too far away, there's just sometimes no way for all of those pellets to actually be able to hit. There is, a spread pattern that you can try and accommodate to a certain extent, but it will spread out the further away from the weapon it goes, and so the closer you are to someone, the more likely you are to one-shot with this. Now, the shield is much slower to deploy, as you can see here. There is a very significant lag time right there. It is entirely possible to splat someone between when they fire a Tenta Brella shot and when the canopy actually goes out, with a lot of different weapons. So that's something you've got to be careful about. This is not something that you can just use reactively the way that you can use the Splat Brella. This is something that you have to have planned ahead of time, and you're not going to be able to move very fast while you're holding it. So it's also not something that you're going to be able to just hold out there and use in fights in the same way. So even though the mechanics are very similar, the implications that those have on how you have to play the game are very different. The way that the Tenta Brella is probably going to play is more by launching its shield and swimming in it. Because the shield moves a lot more slowly, and it's a lot bigger, and if you move inside it, it can be a way that you can sneak up on an opponent that can't really see you because they're just, blocked from sight from seeing you by the shield. It's also especially important for a Tenta Brella to wear Ninja Squid so that it's difficult for an opponent to tell what side of that shield you're on. Very difficult to see the trail or anything like this. Because what someone's going to do as soon as they see a Tenta Brella shield a lot of the time is throw a bomb at it. Just like with the splash wall, if you throw a bomb at this barrier, it's going to explode immediately, rather than exploding after its fuse time is done. You basically take a splat bomb and make it explode the way a burst bomb does. And if you're on the same side of the shield as the bomb is, that explosion just splats you immediately. So it's really important not to be on that side. What people will often try to do is get behind the Brella and throw the bomb at the back side of it so that that will splat you. And so what Brella players will do is sit really, really close to the center point of that shield and try to make it difficult to guess which side they're on, or even, if they see the attack coming, react by being on the correct side of the Brella shield to avoid it. That reaction is only possible if you stay very, very close to that exact center point of the shield, so that it's a very minimal amount of movement that you need, one way or the other, to be able to get on the correct side of it while staying with that shield. So this sort of play style is very high commitment because it requires using a resource that you run out of pretty quickly. You can see here, I don't have a second shield that I can bring out, just like I didn't with the Splat Brella, and only then has it reloaded. You can see that little animation where it came back up. You can see the skinny tent right now, and right here, it is going to reform in my hand. That's when you know you have a second shield ready to go, a second canopy. So you need to, go in and do what you're going to do, but at some point you might just need to back up and wait until you have the second canopy. You may not be able to go all the way in and commit to that one canopy. You may need to stay back, near the back line of your team and be launching these shields to condition players that you're not going to be in them, and only then, once they have that idea, do you go in and try and do something like this. That might be one idea. But the Tenta Brella is generally a fairly safe weapon because it has this shield, because if someone does try to push it, it has this ability to get in one-shot it, to put the shield in the way and be able to get away if it wants to. It has beacons that, if you really need to, you could just put a beacon somewhere, then you could launch the shield, and if you realize, oh, I don't like this, you could just jump out. And you're safe behind the shield while you're making that jump. So you have some options for escape, you have some options for defending yourself, and as such, this is one of the more independent main weapons in the game when played well. What you tend to actually see from Tenta Brellas, a lot of people think that you're going to be this like Reinhardt character, like from Overwatch, who's using the shield to protect the teammates as they push in. And while that's possible, like it's a good way for getting through choke points, more often the playstyle you're going to be seeing out of this weapon is a skirmisher, very similar to the Splat Brella, only more of a flanker, where you're trying to come at someone from a completely different angle, rather than trying to go in and join the fight at the same time that they are. You're trying to get the enemy team's attention because you're behind them, and because you're a Tenta Brella, you can just kind of get away with that. You can threaten like this, and then if someone tries to put overwhelming force on you, you pop this out, and you know what, if you need to, you've got an ink vac, and that can also potentially help keep you safe. As long as your opponent doesn't counterplay it well enough to, punish you for using it. So that's the general game plan that the Tenta Brella will go for. Unfortunately, it's not the greatest weapon at doing things like that, and in part, it's not helped by the lag. The fact that it takes so long to open means that you really need to be very disciplined to get it to work. And that also means that with latency, it's even longer of a time to open the canopy than what is already a pretty long time. Also, its kit is not doing a ton for it. Ink vac is one of the weaker specials in the game at the moment, and so while you do kind of have this double safety sort of thing going on, it seems like on paper it would synergize. You kind of want it to have something a little bit more aggressive. This is actually a really good hammer weapon in Splatoon 2, because the hammer lets you go aggressive when you wanted to. And the weaknesses of the hammer, the vulnerabilities that it had, were offset by the fact that you also have a shield. So you can pop the hammer from within the shield, and now you just have a much more consistent one-shot, and you have something you can throw at people. It was a way to start sparking some chaos in the back lines if you would let the tent get in too far. Here, InkVac is very passive. It's very much about keeping the tent alive. And the biggest thing, you know, at a top level about a Tenta Brella is that if you're able to ignore it, then it's not able to have that much of an impact on the game. It's very slow-moving. It has a very slow, a lot of downtime. It has a lot of time where you can't really be using it as impactfully as you'd like to be. And so if during that time you just go and attack its teammates, a lot of the time it's not going to flank you nearly as quickly and decisively as another weapon will. If you don't pay attention to it, sometimes you can just like go and do something else. It's almost like the Kraken problem in that because there's not a ton of ranged pressure, because it can only do so much to catch up to you, sometimes you can just go after its teammates and not really have to pay that much attention to it, and then it's just kind of sad. So let's go and get a game going for this one as well. One unfortunate part of this is that there's not really much of a flank route on this map. There's only one way onto the enemy side, but I am going to be trying to play a section of the map that will pull their attention away from the zone to at least force them to look in a different direction than where they want to. And hopefully we can get something done that way. So we're able to get the zone here. We're going to start putting this out here, giving them the idea I'm coming this way. We're going to launch that, and we're going to back off. I do not have the resources to continue to push that. I'll hopefully get this up in time to save myself from the charger there. I do not have the ink for this, unfortunately. They did eventually get me, but we still have the zone for now. Probably going to lose it here. We just don't have the numbers. But they never got our beacon, so let's just hop back in there and see if we can do anything with it. Brellas are pretty great at being able to jump into places safely, just because they can put the shield out as they're landing from the super jump. I might demonstrate that in the lobby later if I don't end up having to use it in this match. Didn't get the shield out in time there. Unfortunate. So far, so good. I don't want to make it so that somebody gets bombed off my shield here, but I do need this to be able to get up safely. Okay, that's 2 down. Now it's just this Explo. And we're just going to get in their way. I don't even care if I go down there, because the Explo can't get to the zone in time to unpaint it, and so we're going to win the game for that. I just wanted to really quickly show, since we have beacons here, I wanted to show the super jump tech. This works with all the Brellas, but I can only show it with the Tenta Brella because it has the beacon, which lets me jump from here. But I'm holding ZR, and you can see that I'm already firing a shot from midair. And if you land with a faster Brella than this one, and you jump to that beacon, unfortunately, you know, I can't show it with this, but having that Brella open as soon as you land has a lot of value if, say, you need to cheese a few points off the tower, and so you're super jumping into a dead push just to get those extra points for lead. You know, if you're super jumping in hot and you need to be able to protect yourself or your teammates as soon as you land, that can be some really good utility that you can get out of the Brella in that situation. Alright, well, I haven't gotten significantly better at the Brellas, it would appear. That is kind of the way that's tended to go, but we will soldier onward and finish off with the Undercover Brella. This is much more similar to the way that, say, a shooter weapon will work, where you're not having to manage how long you have your Brella shield up. Because Undercover Brella is just going to hold the button down and keep the shield up, and it's never going to launch. So this has some advantages, of course. You're always protected by that shield for as long as that shield lasts. And your rate of fire is a little bit faster. And you also move fairly quickly while you're using it compared to the others. So those things are kind of nice. It's not a bad painting weapon. But it's got some issues. Number one, this shield is made of paper. It is really, really, really pathetic. In Splatoon 2, it was just one bomb with Object Shredder that you would need to shred this thing. One suction bomb. And that was it. It was just gone at that point. And there's not much more past that you need in this game to be able to shred it. So you really cannot keep this up in front of someone for a very long time, and you still have the issue that the Splat Brella had that I was showing off, that, like, you need to pick your fights very carefully with this thing, because you need to weigh the amount of time that you have that you can stay in that fight against the amount of damage that your shield has taken, and, you know, how much ink you've used. You can't force this towards someone quickly or back away from someone quickly with it. They can get at you faster than you can get away from them. So the fight really needs to be won by the time you are in harm's way and run out of resources. Somebody needs to really commit with this to make this work. Another big problem is the damage you may have been noticing here. 40 is not a lot of damage for a single shot of this to do. And that's if you aim it perfectly. It's very easy to not get 40 damage with this thing. It's very easy for this to, you know, be a more than a 3-shot, a 4-shot. Here we can make it like a 7-shot or something like that. It's just not very consistent. It's not a lot of damage. If you miss even one shot, it increases the time to kill drastically. Similar problem with the Clash Blaster. So, as an offensive weapon, it is not especially threatening. As long as you don't get stuck fighting this, stuck like very much in its range to where it can keep approaching you and do enough damage before you can get away, you can probably just disengage from this, and it's not posing much of a threat. You can just, like, get away from it, and it didn't really do anything except waste a ton of its ink. That's not great, and its kit is also just abysmal. They took the same vanilla undercover kit that it had in Splatoon 2. It had Ink Mine, and it had Splashdown, which has largely been replaced in this game with Reef Slider. So, that kit was the worst kit in Splatoon 2 as well. The Ink Mines give it absolutely no way to poke from any longer range than this. So anything with any longer range just gets to bully it out of position. Its Reef Slider is a great way for it to get in, but even with a weapon like Tetradulies, highly mobile, you know, good slaying weapon, oftentimes the Reef Slider is still just going to get you splatted whenever you press the button. And so for a weapon that's so much weaker at fighting than the Tetradulies are, this is a weapon that wants even less to be in the midst of the enemy's base. You have to be playing this really carefully around cover and have a way to disengage that gets you away from someone long enough to get your ink back, to get your shield back before you go back in. And that means that you have this, like, really limited radius around safety that you're really able to press up and do Brella things in. If you have a team that's, you know, ready and willing to push in with you, it can be a great distraction to the enemy team, because they look at this and they go, ooh, Undercover Brella, food. And then they get frustrated at how it's taking a little bit longer than they expected to be able to kill it. You know, it's a low tier. Jem said so on Squid School. And so we should be able to get on top of this and just splat it right away, right? And then when it, you know, starts to be a little bit more difficult to fight and somebody else shows up, now they're like, huh, why am I losing to this? So there's definitely, you know, a way that you have to counterplay it, and there are some places in fights where it can have strengths. It's just, against top-level competitive players, they know how to counteract an Undercover Brella. They know how to make this thing look useless. So hopefully I will avoid making it look quite as useless. But difficult to say, given that the last couple of games have gone the way they have. One very minor and niche thing is that bumping someone with the Brella does do damage. So in theory, you could splat someone with 2 shots if you bump them twice. Great combo, right, guys? This is not going to happen very often. But it's if you do get like right on top of someone and you're in that kind of scramble situation, you know, it's something to consider trying to go for, because it will decrease your kill time a little bit. Got one down over here. We can't challenge that blaster too much. It's something that will get around the shield, even if it doesn't shred the shield quickly. And it's going to be doing damage from such a safe range that it's challenging to get it down before it gets us down. Dry Slosher there. Gonna be an unfortunate matchup for us to get on the jump there. You can see there, you know, just not super consistent on the damage end. We could be saying, you know, oh, we'll just aim better forehead, but, like, there are other weapons that I don't have to aim that carefully with, and I get a lot more value out of as a result. So, there was a really good example of skirmishing. I didn't get those splats, per se, but I definitely set them up because I got people shooting at my Brella shield. And that's what you're really looking for in fights here. You're looking to get enough attention that your teammates can capitalize. And keep yourself alive, unlike what I did there. We're going to try and keep ourselves alive this way. Nope, they were not trying to camp our jump with a bomb or anything. They were just going to put a triple link strike on our landing. So, that figures. Someone right here. We're going to try and add a little bit of chip damage so our teammates can finish that off. Nice, that's 2 down. We start getting some attention here. See if we can use this effectively. Alright. We probably would have gotten that player if teammate hadn't gotten them already. Start this player off here. We should be able to get them. Yep. Shield kept us alive long enough to do that. Let's mine up the places we don't want our opponents to be able to go. The mines can also be effective for escaping in some situations. If you need just a little bit of extra damage while you're running away from something, the mines can be a source of that damage. Like right there, they were hit by the mine, and so that made it just a little bit easier to be able to get the splat. There, as you can see, I had the shield up, I triggered the special. There is still delay time on the activation of the reef slider that makes it so that you can't just safely launch the special from having the shield open. So I know that's something that people were probably going to think might work about it, but it doesn't, sadly. We're backing up here because we don't have enough of a shield to be able to continue this fight. You can see their shield is not running out as fast as ours is, which makes it very difficult to be able to contest them. And here I tried to turn around and get the shield up to aim behind me after the special was done, but that didn't end up coming out in time. Got a couple there. Now this should probably not go in my favor. Teammate was able to follow up and get one, and maybe we can get another. Nice, nice. Alright. One thing to consider is that just getting the opponents to start a fight with you can be advantageous, because if they're sharking somewhere, and your teammates don't know they're there, and then they start fighting you, they have revealed themselves. Like, it's not something to totally scoff at, that just by getting them to fight you, see, like right there, that it's not worth it if you don't win. Because now, you know, my Rapid Blaster player was able to see the fight that I had started and finish it by getting 2 for 1. And that ended up being in our team's favor. So So I don't want to discount, you know, the value of skirmishing here. It's just, there are other weapons, you know, other classes that are doing a better job right now of skirmishing without sacrificing as much on the front of the main weapon. We got him. We did win a match. Just crazy, because it shows capped on the end screen there, but maybe a bomb exploded after the game was over, which capped it in the end. So, there you go. Number 1 Splat Sister was what I got there. So that was 15, but I'm going to go on the phone real quick and see how many of those I finished versus how many I started. Because you can see, you know, teammates also have some very high numbers there. I'm just pulling this up on the app. 10 of them were assists. 10 of them were assists, as opposed to the player who got 20, 2 of those were assists. The player who got 16, 3 of those were assists. So I did a lot more assisting of that game. And you can see also, you know, I had the most deaths on the team. So I'm kind of throwing myself in there for the sake of my teammates being able to follow up. And fortunately, they had, you know, a bunch of long-range weapons that were perfectly capable of doing that if I just got into the right position for them to shoot at it. So that, I think, is the best illustration that I've given today of the playstyle that kind of all of the Brellas want to have, which is you are a distraction. Kind of like an ink brush we talked about just recently on one of the Squid School VOD reviews, that your goal isn't so much to get the kills as it is to set them up for your team. Your goal isn't so much to take the objective as it is to draw the opponents away from the objective, to waste their time, to get them in a position where your teammates can knock them down. And if you're able to do that well, and then that's kind of the playstyle you're looking for, and you just like the idea of the weapon, you know, definitely give them a shot. I don't mean to discourage someone from ever playing the weapons. It's just, at a competitive level, we're not seeing these at all. And, you know, even players who love Brellas, even players who have played them before, are saying, man, I need to pick up a different weapon. This is not helping me right now. So hopefully they get some bug fixes that will fix some of the more egregious shooting through shield moments. Hopefully, you know, they get some kind of attention in terms of new kits or reworks or anything like that that will make them more a part of the game. Because they are really cool, and they do lend a really interesting element of strategy to the game. One of the coolest Splatoon 2 metagames ever involved the Splat Brella. It was a counter to dualies at the time, which is still the case now, where the Brella isn't so much focused on hitting precise shots as they are just keeping the opponent occupied, and if you keep a dualies occupied long enough, they become immobile, and they can't hit you through your shield, so it's a really good counter against a weapon class like that, and when that was meta, that was something the Brellas did really well. Right now, there's not a lot that they do really well, unfortunately. So, best of luck making them work out there. You guys are the bravest of soldiers, of Squid soldiers, and I hope that you've found at least something out of this video, besides being able to post clips on the Brella Discord about how bad I am at this weapon and laugh at it, although hopefully you've got some good material for that too, that you can learn from my experience with the game.